some situations. This is not acceptable. It's a negative statement. But it is true today. It is not acceptable. It is not acceptable to make the failure of the president your number one priority because all you care about is getting more power for your side. That is not acceptable. If that's negative, well, so be it. Oh, come on, guys, put me through my paces. Are you all persuaded that we're in a crisis as serious as I suggest? I mean, I have a son who just graduated from college. And before he went off to college, I'll be right with you. Before he went off to college, he was sort of my student there as we watched the news. And I tried to tell him, America was not always like this. One of my concerns in talking to young people is, do you really get that this is different? I'm not saying we haven't had dishonest politicians. I'm not saying we haven't had corruption. I'm not saying we haven't had elements of all this. But there's something fundamentally wrong and different, unprecedented about the present situation. And you guys, born in 1990, coming of age when Clinton was impeached because of behavior that wasn't necessarily a high crime or misdemeanor, you've been watching American politics in a fashion that if you grew up, when I grew up in a world that was shaped by the people who shaped the world I grew up in, the second greatest president, FDR, for 12 years, the seventh greatest president, according to American historians, Harry Truman, the 11th greatest president, Dwight Eisenhower, you would have very different standards of what's acceptable. I don't want you to think this is the standard you have to accept. It is contrary to everything that has made this country great for more than 2 centuries. It was not always like this. This is abnormal. I know it's very hard for words like I'm speaking, or even a history book, to counter your actual experience. But there has been in America a basic fact that you could count on almost all the way from our major political parties, which is in addition to maneuvering for advantage and for power, they have been felt that they had a basic primary responsibility to take care of the nation's business and to serve the people. That is not the case with the force that has arisen on the political right, and we have not seen that before.
So, Doctor, you are running in one of the most notoriously conservative congressional districts in Virginia versus a 10-term incumbent. What is your plan on trying to compete in a district that's so heavily conservative, as well as competing against the Republican Party of Virginia and their political machine? Because, as we all know, they are very well funded and they're very competitive.
Well, a lot of people say that politics is all about money. If that's true, I don't see how I win. Unless, a whole bunch of people appear on the scene that I don't expect. I don't have a super PAC. I'm not interested in having a super PAC. I actually think, maybe this is naivete, maybe this is my upbringing and my family, and the values that I have about the truth. I think the truth is powerful. I think that there is something about the truth that is stronger than me. So for me, the whole issue is, can I reach people with my message? Can I have access to voters without having $1 million? And that depends on people power. You guys can't vote for me unless you're registered in Roanoke or something like that. Votes are one thing. But there's all kinds of everything else that anybody can do to help make a campaign successful. You can do. Your parents can do. There's meet and greets. There's opening up the doors to groups so that I can speak to groups. There's going door to door. There's making phone calls. There's writing checks. All kinds of things can be done. And whether or not this catches fire, I'm not Harriet Beecher Stowe at this point. Maybe I won't be Harriet Beecher Stowe. But that kind of thing does happen. Who would have thought that a young man in Tunisia, burning himself to death out of despair at the incapacity of his society to make any use of him and the skills that he had developed as an educated young man, burning himself to death, would start a conflagration that ends up with Hosni Mubarak out of power in Egypt, Muammar Gaddafi out of power and dead in Libya, and Bashir Assad teetering as we speak in Syria. Who would have thought? History isn't supposed to work that way. David isn't supposed to beat Goliath. If we give up before we start, we know we lose. If we fight, and if the fire gets started, who knows what can happen? There is a dark force operating in America today. If people will respond from the kind of thing that we saw in Grant Park on the election night, 2008, the look in people's eyes, the aspiration, the desire to live in a country that is better than what we are becoming. If people feel the spirit kindle within them, who knows what we can accomplish? I know what the realities are. 6238 registration, basically, in the 6th district. But they are decent people, mostly, as far as I can tell. And I've lived among them for a couple decades. If that decency can be tapped, if their eyes can be opened, who knows what can happen? The lie should not be able to defeat the truth. Yes?
Taking your last statement, one of the things that's been happening recently is the lie has been defeating the truth. And it's unfounded that in such that the hate has become so large. For example, booing a gay soldier who's serving in Iraq. Going farther than just lie and truth, how do you combat the current hate in the atmosphere, particularly among politicians and activists and just other people?
Well, the problem we face in America today didn't happen overnight. I see people like Rush Limbaugh as having been, in a sense, the avant-garde of this. He's like a human wedge. How to demonize and discredit and to teach people to pander to their prejudices so that they regard the image those people have of liberals. Liberal. You know, that word is like a dirty word. I did a radio show in which I asked, do you think of liberals as, where would you put yourself? On the one hand, thinking of liberals as your fellow Americans, have some differences of opinion, but they're your fellow Americans and with whom you should have dialogue to try to create a common future. Or do you see them as the enemy who should be kept away from any kind of power, only to be defeated? And I got lots of calls on the Latin to that. So I know something about what you're talking about. And it didn't happen overnight. And it happened while people on our side of the aisle slept. It should have been a scandal from the beginning. I went into radio because of Rush Limbaugh, because I wanted to create a different kind of a conversation. And I felt, for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a visible impact on a community. I had a lot of years to do that. And I felt gratified that it did have an effect. And I think, I was talking to somebody earlier today, taped an interview, who said that there are a lot of people who consider themselves Republican, but they just sort of do it from habit. They're not committed. I'm not thinking that the people who are filled with poison at this point are going to respond to what I'm saying. The poison takes time to work itself out. There will always be some poison in the political system that just shouldn't run the show. But there are a lot of people who vote Republican who are not wedded to emotionally that the visceral hatred, that it sort of serves a purpose for them. And I think there are enough of them that if I can reach them and move them, we can strike the blow I'm talking about. And if once we make it so that the disgraceful behavior pays a price instead of gets rewarded, I mean, they have done very well by doing very bad things. Once we can see with the healthcare debate, There were Republicans that were taking a normal American approach. Okay, well, we got a problem, let's start dealing with it. Like Grassley from Iowa, I think, was in that position. And then he saw that because of the way things were going, which both parties were playing a role, that he was actually going to pay a bigger political price if he went against the hate mongers than if he would pay a big political price for being cooperative. Like that senator from Utah, Bennett. He worked with Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon on trying to come up with a good idea for health care. The people, the extreme in Utah kicked him out, substituted a tea party. If we can change the reward structure, we can begin to take the poison out of the system, but it isn't going to happen overnight.
Okay, well, I think that's probably all that we have time for in this room, but if you want to continue to have a conversation with Dr. Schmookler, I'm sure we can stick around.
Okay,
Maybe not.
should I stay here to have it, if anybody wants to have it, or is there some other place?
I guess just talk to you here, and then you can
Okay.
go someplace else.
Well, thank you.
that's all.
If you didn't sign up and would like to, the sign-up sheet is back here by the door.
I appreciate this very much.